All right, so now our week 4 code up. Now this code up is going to cover more pages than we did last time because it's going to get all the way through the chapter where you at the end of this basically have your working, not basically, you have your working autogram as far as the way it's going to function. You're going to add some more with CSS next time, CSS animations, but this is really what I would say is the most important for you understanding these concepts to be able to recreate them when you do your develop, what I call develop it. Is that what I called it? I actually had a question. I should have done this before but it's okay. Right, so in this case, when we get to the place, and I've already given you guys the heads up about this, and I did call develop it, right? So you're going to develop it 1 and 2. And I said this on attendance for this week, but now I'm actually going to have you do something with this, is that in this week, and by the way, before I get there, just slow down for a minute, is that here are the points that you need to have done your commits on the code. And sometimes I get this, I had this happen to me. It's like I get so into it I forget to do the commits. So one thing you can do is, if you plan on keeping the book, which if I was you I would, but somehow note on the book, either through tabs or something, those places in the book, because basically they're just headings, but they're also the major concepts that you're following. So whatever you need to do so that when I look at your work I actually see these points, these commit at these points. Okay, so do that, make sure you follow that through. So here this week, last week I had you give some thought to what you might create, and I noticed several of you kind of followed along the concept I did with creating a game. I just want you to know that's not a requirement, but and maybe you are already thinking about it, totally cool. I did, so I just want you to think about, right, and again, as you're seeing this autogram come together, what's something you would like to create based on, right, creating creating some kind of user interaction with this code that you're learning, to these concepts, these JavaScript concepts that you're learning, right? Accepting arguments or declaring parameters, returning values, adding event listeners, iterating through thumbnails, right? So again, I want you to, as you do this work, keep in your mind, because the more you understand what is really going on in that code, the easier it's going to be once you recreate it, or not recreate it, once you attempt to develop whatever it is you're creating based on what you've learned. Okay, so I just want to say that. And so now the additional work that I'll have you do in addition to these commits is I want you to review the develop 1 and 2 that I've written up. I will tell you, and by the time you see this, hopefully I will add this. One thing I did forget to add was the CSS animation. So you'll have to have an example, have that into your, because that's the next part of what we do, right? So I've gone through here and I've written up, and these are drafts because and that's part of why I'm interested in your feedback. What part of this would you want me to cover more? Any of that, right? Any part of this. So I'm going to have you write a user story. I'm going to have you review on 106 the overview of the project. You're going to build the now by the way, this is your first one, so you'll have 2 weeks of this. So this is the deliverables that you will need for this first week, right? So build out your HTML and CSS, make sure it's responsive, mobile ready, semantic markup, which is, by the way, one of the things I need to change about mine. I'll show you here in a minute, or at least walk you through my code, quick walkthrough, and then create a so you'll create a directory within your develop folder for your name of your project, and then complete your normal workflow. Okay, so that's draft 1. So I want you to read over these drafts and then give me either any comments or feedback, and you add this to your index file for your develop. Okay, I'll just go over that in just a second. So you have 2 of them, right? So the second one, I'll do this because you're not there yet. On the second one, this is actually where you deliver the code. And here's the key is your code must work and be without errors. It needs to do the event listeners from an array of images or block level elements, must respond to user input and satisfy a user story. Now it needs to have some kind of meaningful input here, okay? Well documented, right? This is important. I'm going to come back to this in a second too, but need to be done in a functional style with the autogram, meaning functions, create functions in logical flow of program functionality. And here's the biggie, in my opinion, and yours, I'm guessing as well, is you need to write this code yourself and be prepared to explain each line. Looking for code samples is fine. Those are inspirations, but only use that which you can explain. Okay? And then, of course, update your project and submit. So let's go back to this. So here's the thing, when you're walking through this code up, what you're learning, this style, is a precursor for what we learn later. Now this is my kitty match that I did. And so I had written it more in a sequential code before, but I rewrote it. Matter of fact, here's my old one. And I just did this to kind of get through it. And then I realized I really needed to refactor it in a way that follows this same idea of, functions should really have a limited scope, input, outputs. You should have them be very targeted in what they're doing. It shouldn't, really this is, there's some thinking about they shouldn't have a certain number of lines in them, but really more is that they're broken up to logical functions that you're doing. Okay, so this is the way I did mine. And so what happened was, and so you can just kind of look through here and see, mine in some ways looks like the beginning of what the autogram was, but quickly I changed because once I did my event listeners, I was actually counting clicks, and then depending on the number of clicks I was responding in different ways, and I could just see so much more. I want to add, I may just continue because it was so freaking fun to do this, but then, and one thing I know I'm going to change is right now to find out if they match or not is I'm looking at the alt tag, but I'm going to end up changing this to the data image that you see, the data variable that they were using. I'll change that for sure. And then I'll just show you the output, right? It's still the same output, except now you can't click a third one. Okay, so that's the key to that. And I actually need to update my messages here, right? So, but going back here. So I want you to give this thought. Again, I'm throwing out the idea I came up with. There's many ways you could approach getting this done. As long as it's, again, this is why I'm every week as we're going through this code up, I'm having you think about that. Okay, and having you think about those concepts so that you get there. So review these two. And so here's what I mean. And let me just go back here. Is going back to so remember, and I said this, but in the attendance for week 3, which actually I'm recording this in week 3, is that making sure, because I run the server from your code once I grab it off of GitHub, and then I think I already, yeah, I was going to say I already did this a little bit. And actually, here's the other thing that's going to come at you in the next couple of weeks is I want you to create a more meaningful page here. I think somebody already has, which is awesome. I'm going to end up playing around with CSS Grid because I think that's a fun thing to learn. I know those of you taking 85 are learning Flexbox, which is awesome. I'm going to play around with CSS Grid, grid layout to do something with this to make this more meaningful and stand out like a real portfolio. So just know that I'm probably going to throw that in our next week's work. Okay, so we're at week 4, and I'm a little late here recording here because I think a couple of people have already submitted files, which is awesome. Okay, so what I'm going to do is attempt to get through these two as well so that you know what's heading at you at week 5. So I will tell you, I'm actually traveling. I think week 8 possibly is my travel week, October 12th. I'm heading to New York for 5 days, which is totally fun, and I just have to plan out. So just know that I'll have content. My hope is to always have at least 2 weeks ahead of you, but I'm a little behind schedule, so need to get up. But I also wanted to see how well you guys were consuming this content, and it seems like for now you are. The chat, when you, it seems like when you reach out, you know, those of you that reach out seem like that's helpful. So I know that's a lot, but I'm going to go ahead and, as I did with the challenges this week, I'll leave that video where I actually walk through how to do the work in case you want to remember, but I'll put this video right here, so it'll be the first one listed. Okay, so hopefully that helps you understand. Make sure you get that again, and I said feedback and or comments on the stuff, the requirements listed, and that would be like if you want additional information, or if clarification, what does that mean, right? That's what I want you to put there. All right, talk to you later. Bye.